Hi there. In this video, I'm going to cover how to work the alligator border. As you can see in here, for the border, we're going to make a series of increases very close to each other, and those increases are beaded stacked increases. So we're adding beads to make the increase, and we're going to do this all around the circumference of the shawl. When we're working these increases, because we're adding so many stitches and they'll be very hard to manage, we're going to start our repeat right before we make the increase. We make the increase and then we knit 2 stitches past that increase, and then we get back to the front, to the beginning, and we bind off all of these stitches. Then we begin the process again. We knit 1 stitch, we make the increase, we knit 2 stitches beyond that increase, then we come back to the beginning and bind off all stitches. Because as we are working the round and making our increases, we're circling back to the beginning and binding off. We need 2 yarn sources. The first yarn source is to continue the knitting, and the second yarn source is to begin the bind off process and then continue the bind off process. So every time we make an increase or we repeat the increase pattern, we use our first yarn source, and then when we circle back to make the bind off, we use our second yarn source. So if you've started with a cake like this, whether you started from the outer pole or the inner pole, use the available yarn source for the bind off. However, if you are using 2 different skeins of yarn, then just bring in the other skein for your other yarn source. To show you how to work the alligator border, I'm going to leverage this short piece of knitting, and the process that you'll go through, even though your scarf will be knitted in the round, is exactly the same as the process I'm going to demonstrate here. For this, you need your double pointed needles. I'm using about 6-inch double pointed needles. If you have 4 inches, those will work as well. You don't want very long needles. And of course, I need my beads, my crochet hook, and then also I need another yarn source. For this demo, I'm actually going to use a different color so that you're able to see it as I'm working this process or this technique. I've prepared my crochet hook and I've inserted 4 beads on it, and I'm going to take my first double pointed needle, and the first time I start the border, I'm going to knit that first stitch. Then I'm going to release all the extra loops that I made for that stitch where I'm going to add the beads. So I released all of them. We'll insert my first bead, put that stitch back on the left needle tip, and knit yarn over knit to make my first part of the increase. Then insert a second bead, replace that on the left needle tip, and knit yarn over knit. At this point, I'm going to insert the third bead, and replace that yarn that stitch on the left needle tip. And then I'm going to bring my second double pointed needle, and I'm going to work the top of the increase. Oops, I split my yarn in here, which is a knit, yarn over and a knit. And on that same needle I'm going to make the left side of that increase, inserting my needle tip between the second and third bead, and make a knit, yarn over, knit. Oops. And then repeat for between the first and second. And I'm going to knit 2 stitches, which will be my first repeat. So here I've started by knitting 1 stitch, made the right side of the beaded stacked increase on my first double pointed needle. Then I inserted my third bead and made the top of that beaded stacked increase with the second double pointed needle, and then made the left side of the increase on that same needle, and I knitted 2 stitches to complete that pattern repeat. So as you've noticed, the pattern repeat is 4 stitches. So then once I'm done with this pattern repeat, I'm going to scoot all the stitches from the beginning of the pattern repeat, and I'm going to take my third double pointed needle and my second yarn source, and I'm going to bind off all around. For this bind off, I'm going to use a purl 2 together bind off. So the purl 2 together bind off starts by purling the first stitch and then purling the next stitch. Then insert the left tip of that first, or this double pointed needle, behind both stitches together, and then knit those stitches together, purl these stitches together, and then repeat the process. Purl 1 stitch, insert the needle behind both stitches on the right double pointed needle, and purl them together. So I'm just going to continue all around until I've bound off all stitches except for 1 stitch. So I'm almost to the end of the repeat, and I am purling that last stitch on that second needle and purl 2 together. So here I've completed the bind off of all of these stitches that I've put on the 2 double pointed needles. And as you can see, this is kind of, because I'm working with worsted weight yarn, it looks kind of very large, but you can see the point in here. So we've made the increase with the blue yarn, and we've bound off with the second yarn source, which is this beige or brown colored yarn. And at this point, this needle here, this double pointed needle, which has just 1 stitch on it, becomes our first double pointed needle to begin the next process. So then, to begin the next repeat, oh sorry, I was gonna start working with this, but that's wrong, because this is my bind off yarn. I need to take back excuse me, I need to start with my blue yarn and knit 1, then release all of these wraps and begin the process all over again by making the beaded stacked increase. And by now I am sure you're familiar with how to make this increase, having worked through 3 sections of the alligator scarf. So here I finished the increase and I'm knitting 2 stitches for that to complete that repeat. Here we go. So I've made my next increase, and now I'm ready to bind off these stitches. So I bring my 3rd double pointed needle, scoot all of these stitches, and here, if you notice, this stitch has already been worked. So all I have to do is slip it or transfer it from this needle to my 3rd double pointed needle simply by transferring it from tip to tip, and then begin the bind off process by purling that next stitch and purling 2 together, same as we did before. I'm going to show you how to work this decrease if you are a continental knitter. So it's the same exact process. Oops, it's a bit cumbersome because I'm naturally a traditional knitter. So purl, move the yarn to the front, and since we don't need this double pointed needle anymore, we can just use this one and insert purl the next stitch, purl the next stitch, insert the left needle tip behind both and purl them together. And we repeat the process until the last stitch. I'm almost to the end of binding off the stitches for the 2nd beaded stacked increase, and this is the last one to be worked. So you'll notice I made 2 stacked increases in here. What's nice about the process of making the increase and rather working that repeat, including making the increase and then binding off and then repeating the process, is that we already see part of the border completed. Now because we have a long border, this is going to take a while, but at least as we look at it, we kind of get a sense of accomplishment, a piece at a time. Before I end this video, I want to talk a little bit about blocking and give you a final tip. When I blocked my scarf, I actually took and put a pin right before the top of the beaded stacked increase on both sides, like I'm doing it right here. And the reason I did this is because I actually preferred the shape of the rectangular shape of this increase, and it made the scarf look a lot more unique than actually going ahead and sticking a pin like in the center like this and making it as like a pointy type shape. Now of course this is a personal preference, and so if you like or prefer this rectangular shape, which is a more unique shape, then just place the pin on either side of the top of the increase. Again, I just put a pin right before and right after, like so. I hope this has been helpful. I really appreciate your support and your interest in the alligator scarf. Thank you for watching, and happy knitting.